the application, what we might call the DTP application, whether that's Word or FrameMaker or InDesign or whatever, will automatically refresh itself with the French or the German screen clips when you move the DTP program file into the relevant folder. And clearly, as part of that, you also need to use identical image sizes. If it's set to 400 by 600 in the English, then you need it set to 400 by 600 in the French and the German. You don't want to be manually resizing within the publishing environment, because then clearly you're going to have to manually resize in each of the localized versions as well, so you get a multiplied cost coming in. Size matters. I mentioned before that we generally find translated text runs longer. What do I mean by runs longer? Well, one of two things. There's an example here that the very simple Windows interface undo button is ongedaan maken in Dutch. I gather we've got somebody from Belgium on the line, so I hope I didn't murder the Dutch pronunciation too much there. But typically French needs about 30% more column inches than English. This is going back to the old newspaper days. And German, Dutch, plus a good number of other languages use compound nouns. So whereas we have words and then a space and another word in English, if compound noun is two words in English, in German the equivalent is going to be compound noun as one word. And that certainly has an implication on word length, and if you're looking at design of the document, that would be an indicator to perhaps avoid very narrow column widths. Let's see if I can show you an example of something that we're talking about there. Here we go. This is actually a set of quick start guides for laser printers, and you'll find this on my company's website. There's a link down at the bottom. If you click on the DTP menu item, then you'll find your way to this, I think. And it just shows, if we just look at installing the printer driver, you can see how we've taken some layout decisions. One or two it's slightly more right ranged, some are centered, but we've got very varied amounts of space that we need. The Dutch, which is the second one down on the left side, nice and short. It looks even more concise from the English. But if you look at the French immediately below that, we have Installation du pilote d'imprimante, so that's a longer one, and the Portuguese version at the bottom right is fairly lengthy as well. But just things to think about when you start setting up a document and designing it. We tend to look, as we're designing it, at the length, the space that the English takes, if that's what we're writing in, and we really need to think, how's that going to work in other languages, and have they got lots and lots of space to expand. And it's allowing that space to expand that's important. For example, I think if I just flick back there, the headings here, when we first saw this manual for translation, the text box in, I think this was FrameMaker, was set to about the correct size for installing the printer driver. So clearly we were going to have to manually resize that text box in each of the languages where it ran slightly longer. Now, we saved our client from incurring that cost by having a dialogue with them, and we sent them away again and said, every time you've got a text box like this, simply set it to the full width of the page. If you've got the space available, use it. Don't place limitations there when they don't need to be. And I'd recommend that generally where you've got text boxes, call-outs, frames, headings. If there's anything in your publishing application that constrains the size, just set it to the absolute maximum, biggest available size that you realistically can. Avoid narrow columns. I've seen some fault tracing sections in manuals where there's very, very narrow column widths, and if you've got compound nouns in languages, it can be a real problem. You then end up starting to hyphenate things, and hyphenation in different languages follows different rules. So really that's something that's best avoided if you can do. And the next concept that I want to look at is one of using templates for localization. Before I get on to templates for localization, we're still talking about text boxes. This is an interesting example. If you look at the English, they use step 2, and it starts off, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. It's fine. The document design works really well in English. It looks nice, and the differentiation in colours is really good. We hit an interesting challenge here. The check at the top right fits quite nicely. The Polish at the bottom right works kind of okay. The Hungarian at the bottom left shows that we have a space limitation there, and I just kind of wish that light blue bit had been a centimetre or so, half an inch wider to allow a bit more space, because in the German, for example, we'd use zweite Schritt, and that extra couple of characters, particularly with the C and H being wider characters, that's quite a tight fit, and that's one where we did try and suggest to the client they might like to redesign that, and they didn't feel able to on that particular occasion. So having digressed myself, I'll now digress myself back again, and we'll talk about templates for localization. This is an idea that we developed some time ago, and I've encountered it from other people as well. If you're producing your master document in English, and you are then translating into other languages, if you know that you're going to need more space in the other languages, or you're likely to need more space, you can do a number of things in the design templates to cater for that. And I think the interesting concept is simply having different design templates for the languages. You could have one for the English and one for all the others, or you may end up with a different design template for each language. But if, when you're designing the English, you will allow for space for things to grow, some of the tricks that have been used historically to squeeze things into the same page-for-page format have been to drop the font size or drop the leading, the line spacing a little bit in the localized versions, and you can turn that around, and you can slightly oversize those in the English to start with, and that way the localized stuff doesn't look too small, but you've bought yourself a little bit of space. You can do similar things with margins on the page sides and at the top and bottom of the page. And just generally, don't cram stuff on the page. If the page is crammed full in English, it's almost guaranteed you're going to have a problem in the foreign language. And what we're trying to do here is alter our thinking so that, as a general approach, we avoid having to go in and manually sort out a problem. So plenty of spare white space around the place is a good thing when you're looking at setting up documents to set automated workflows for. I hope that gives a bit of a view into how I deal with stuff in the real world. I would always start off that in an ideal world, I try and set up an XML-based workflow, because you are separating your form and your content. But I very much recognise that many of us deal with historical documents. Our companies have systems up and running, and we need to work with what's there as well. And those are pointers that you could use in Word or in FrameMaker or any other publishing program. Sarah asked me to talk specifically about multiple file formats, and one of the challenges of working in the translation industry is that we do see a very wide variety of file formats. We see manuals in Microsoft Word, we see manuals in FrameMaker, in